Imagine waking up in a country where a gun ban that lawmakers spent years defending suddenly collapses overnight. Not by a vote, not by a legislative debate, but by the blunt force of a court ruling that sends shockwaves through every state house in America. Police chiefs are scrambling, attorneys general are issuing emergency memos, state legislators are on the phone with crisis teams, and governors are calling private late-night meetings trying to figure out what just happened. Gun owners are celebrating, gun control groups are panicking, and millions of Americans are asking the same question. Is this the beginning of a nationwide shift or the start of total legal chaos? Because, make no mistake, what just happened isn't small, it isn't symbolic, it isn't theoretical. It is a legal earthquake so powerful that states with some of the strictest firearm regulations in the country are suddenly standing on thin ice, not knowing what survives and what evaporates next. This is the collapse. For years, states relied on a patchwork of firearm bans, magazine restrictions, semi-automatic rifle bans, accessory bans, restrictive permitting systems, and dense rule books so complicated that even law-abiding citizens struggled to interpret them. Many believed these laws were permanent fixtures. Political leaders promised they were untouchable. Advocacy groups said they were necessary, and anti-gun states treated them like sacred scripture. But the collapse didn't start today. It started quietly years ago with a fundamental shift in how courts interpret the Second Amendment. And now, that shift has erupted into national chaos. The first cracks appeared after a major Supreme Court ruling changed everything. Courts could no longer rely on modern public safety arguments to justify gun control. Instead, judges were required to examine laws through a historical lens. Suddenly, any ban that couldn't be traced back to the founding era was vulnerable. That meant modern bans, especially broad or sweeping ones, were placed under a microscope. Gun rights groups immediately recognized the opportunity. Lawyers filed challenge after challenge, state after state, law after law. And slowly, inevitably, the pressure built up in the system like steam behind a steel door. Then, the door finally blew open. A federal court issued a ruling so sweeping that multiple state-level bans were put on pause, blocked or struck down, triggering what commentators are now calling the gun ban collapse. The ruling didn't erase every law. It didn't legalize every weapon, but it fundamentally changed the test for whether bans can survive, and under that test, many simply can't, and that's why states are in panic mode. Overnight, the legal foundation for dozens of firearm restrictions weakened. Certain bans on common rifle platforms became difficult to defend. Magazine restrictions, especially those limiting capacity to 10 rounds or fewer, were suddenly on the chopping block. Accessory prohibitions, especially those without historical equivalents, became nearly impossible to justify. In anti-gun states, leaders are scrambling to redefine their laws. Governors are meeting with lawyers. Attorneys general are drafting urgent responses. Police departments are updating or pausing enforcement protocols. Legislators are attempting rapid revisions of statutes before courts tear them down completely. Meanwhile, gun stores are being bombarded with calls. Is the ban really over? What can I legally buy now? Is my state changing the rules? Is this temporary or permanent? Nobody wants to make a wrong move, not buyers, not sellers, not lawyers, and certainly not law enforcement officers. The uncertainty is thick, it's real, it's national. And the collapse is not happening in isolation. It's exposing a deep fracture between states, between courts, and between political worldviews. Gun-friendly states are celebrating the ruling as a historic victory, framing it as a return to constitutional principles. Some are already pushing to expand permitless carry. Others are considering new laws, reinforcing Second Amendment protections and blocking federal interference. But gun control states view the ruling as an emergency. They argue that the court's historical standard makes modern regulation nearly impossible, because the problems of 2025 are not the problems of 1791. They warn of increased crime, accelerated gun trafficking, and public safety risks. So they are fighting back. Some states are drafting workaround legislation, laws designed to indirectly regulate firearms without calling it a ban. Others are considering taxes, mandatory training requirements, storage mandates, or zoning restrictions for gun businesses. And while all of this is happening, courts across the country are preparing for a tidal wave of new lawsuits. Every major firearm restriction, from purchase wait times to magazine rules to sensitive place limits, is now vulnerable to legal challenge. This is why analysts are calling it a collapse. Not because one law fell, not because one ruling changed something small, but because the entire framework of gun control in America is being rewritten. This ruling sends a simple but powerful message. If the founders didn't have a ban like it, it probably won't survive today. That doesn't mean all regulations disappear, but it does mean states can no longer rely on broad modern bans with no historical basis, and that alone reshapes the national landscape. The result? Panic in some states, celebration in others, confusion everywhere. For millions of Americans, this collapse means the laws they lived under for years, maybe decades, may no longer apply. Some will regain rights they thought were lost forever. Others fear the collapse will lead to more guns on the streets. But the truth is this: we are entering one of the most uncertain and unpredictable moments in the entire history of American firearm regulation. Lawmakers can't predict what will happen. Attorneys can't predict what will survive. Judges are divided. Citizens are divided. States are divided. And the collapse is still unfolding. More bans will be challenged. More laws will be paused. More rulings will drop. More states will enter panic mode. This isn't the end of gun regulation in America. And it isn't the final victory for gun rights groups. This is the beginning of a long nationwide fight, a fight that will determine what the Second Amendment means for the next 100 years. Whether you support more regulation or less, whether you're a gun owner or not, this moment matters, because once the legal system shifts this dramatically, it doesn't shift back easily. This collapse is a legal turning point, and the rest of the country is just starting to feel the impact.